If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and we thank you for listening and calling in to today's program. Quite an exciting show today, being the 6th of December, 2022. Again, thank you. To get in contact with the show, as some have already done, just call this number, 516-453-9921. Make sure you press the number 1 button if you have a question or comment so that I can properly introduce you. I have a new screen in front of me now, so I'm going to have to work with that bad boy, but we will endeavor to persevere on that. You can do that, and you can also do this. You can go to the chat room, and I'll give you the information for that. All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com, and wait a minute, I'm getting cannot get into the chat room. Wow, how about that? All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com, and then you want to make sure you go to the where it says the programs, and you want the Produce Justice Show. And then when you get the Produce Justice Show, then once you get that, then the chat room becomes available to you. Now, right now, I'm showing on the screen that there's a connection problem in the chat room, so I don't know what's going on with that. So we'll try to get that straightened out. But it says cannot connect. Please check your internet connection. My internet connection is good, so I don't know what's going on with that. But you have to call in today. So thank you, Corey. Thank you, Swa. And for those who are in online, make sure that you give a call screener your name. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And the Gmails are stacking up. We have quite a few of the Gmails, so we'll get to them as soon as we can or as time permits. We'll do that. So we'll go on, from there. But that's what you can do with that. For those of you who missed the program that Carl Nelson had on the Carl Nelson Show when Mr. Fuller was on there, that show was December the 1st, 2022, in his interview. He also, before Mr. Fuller came on at 8, he had an interview with Dr. James Small, about a 2-hour interview, and he spoke about the Hebrew Israelites and what Kyrie Irving spoke about, but he has evidence, matter of fact, archaeological and historical evidence of what happened on it. It's a very good show, so you may want to check into that before Mr. Fuller came on at 8 a.m. It's a very, very good show. Matter of fact, I listened to the entire 4 hours of the program. Thank you, Darnell, for tuning in. I listened to the entire 4 hours, and it was a very good interview. And, of course, Mr. Fuller was off the chart in what he had to say. So it was very good. The two actually just were together. So when you get a chance, make sure that you get the opportunity to look at that. It'd be very, very good. All the books are in, and Mr. Fuller will discuss his books during the program, so make sure that you give a listen to that. So without further ado, let me introduce to some and present to others Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay, you are still learning. Okay, bear in mind, listening audience, that the usual suspects are in play here, so I still cannot get anybody in the chat room. So I don't know what's going on with that bad boy, but we will do what we can do. Okay, we have this segment that we call the Thoughts and Expressions from the Mind of Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, being that this is the 6th day of December of 2022, what is on your mind today?
Well, a lot of people are buying presents and whatnot, so, and they will be doing this, but try to, I'm just saying this is a part of the code, try to limit anything that you buy for anybody or anything that you acquire to something that when you look at it, if it's something that's designed to be looked at or heard, that the effect of it when you look at it or hear it, if it's something that produces sound, that it makes you think of things that are constructive. That's whether it's a recording or something of that type or a device that helps to produce recordings. That's something to hear, something auditory. Or if it's a thing that is manufactured that's designed to be seen. For example, someone gave me a gift many years ago, and it was an artistic item. And he said, well, you can interpret it any way that you want to, because it was some type of figurine. It wasn't in the form of a person. It was just something on a stand. And so I looked at it and I said, well, and he asked, the person that gave it to me asked me, what do you think about when you see it? I said, well, right now I'm not thinking about anything except you're giving it to me and I'm looking at it. But I've had it for some years, and that is still my evaluation. So it may still have something in the future. It depends on where my mind is. But I'm saying avoid giving as a gift anything that doesn't contribute to a person's thinking that will produce results of constructive value. Always think about it when you're looking at it, regardless of what it is. Will it contribute to a person thinking in a constructive manner? That's the bottom line. And if it doesn't, put it back on the shelf. Don't give it to anybody, or don't get it for yourself. We accumulate a lot of stuff. We should look around at the stuff that we have and say, what do I think about when I actually look at all this stuff? Because I'm paying a high price just for storing it. I mean, you're paying rent or a house note or something like that. That's a high price to pay for something that you have accumulated. And over the years, you got more and more and more maybe. The less you have, really, the better. That will make you think constructively, because it's all about what you call your something you have in the place where you reside is all about what does this contribute to me doing something of constructive value. Everything that I'm looking at, how is it contributing to me doing something of constructive value? Thinking of something of constructive value. A great improvement over my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not, it's taking up space. It really is. And like with most black people, we're migratory because the white supremacist system causes us to be migratory, meaning we got to move. And that's going to be more and more and more and more and more of that. So when you move, you don't want to have a whole lot of stuff that is valueless. It doesn't have a lot of value. It's just stuff that you have. Look at all the stuff that you have. Don't acquire any more of it until you figure out what value is this, really, of real value, other than I have it. And I'm looking around for space for it. Because most black people run out of space with the little space that they're allowed. They run out of space real quick, and wherever they happen to be. This pertains to most black people. You just don't have enough space. And a lot of it is because you have acquired a whole lot of unnecessary items to be of any productivity at all. If you just take count of them. Just a thought. Now I'm ready to listen to somebody else's question.
All right, just a thought. Okay. Before we get into the callers, I'm beginning to get some message on the chat room, so it's apparently beginning to work, and that's good. Thank you, Excerpt Cha-Cha, and you're in, and all the rest of them. There are at least 3 or 4 people in there. Swall, while you're waiting, let me see if you can get into that chat room also. Okay, anyway, Mr. Fuller, let's do this here. I have a Gmail from Randolph as we work through our technical difficulties here. It says, I want to ask a question about what label non-white means. The reason I'm asking is that I've been listening to your show since 2016, 2017, and only black people have called into your show, Mr. Fuller, and I'm not, and not other, quote, non-whites such as Chinese, Japanese, South Americans, brown, red people, etc. Also, please, so he wanted you to answer that.
Non-white means any color other than white. That's non-white. White is the standard for the entire world. If you're a person who is classified as a white person, you are the standard for the entire world. Because the people who are classified as white have conquered, through a system called the system of white supremacy, all of the non-white people of the entire planet, every last one of them. That's a done deal, unless I've been misinformed. Now, if I've been misinformed, I want somebody to call in and tell me that real quick. What people who are classified as non-white do not come under the dictatorship of the system of white supremacy. I'd like to know who they are. Because if there's any, just one person, I mean, then everything that I've been saying is null and void all these years. White supremacy means just that over non-white people. You have white people, non-white people. That doesn't say that all white people are white supremacists, but it does say that all the white people who are white supremacists are dominant over the people who are not white in every area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. They control the activities of the non-white people of this planet.
Okay. All righty. There you have the answer to that. And we move on. Thank you, Constructive Action Items. And I do apologize for the technical difficulties that we are having, or that I'm having. The usual suspects are definitely in play. As a matter of fact, I had spoken to Robert early this morning or 11:30 last night because it started last night. But nevertheless, we're still here doing the best that we can. Moving on with the show. Get ready, Corey, in Milwaukee. Let's see if I can get you in here without any trouble. Get ready, Corey. Let me see here. Rebuffering. Okay, Corey, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, I wanted to ask if you heard about a recent event that happened in Milwaukee where a 10-year-old black child killed his mother because she woke him up early and she wouldn't buy him a video game. I just wanted to know if you heard about that and if you have any insight onto this tragic event.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that, but under the system of white supremacy, according to the code, this is to be expected. We're trained that way, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. It's going to be more of it. See, we don't know. We don't realize that we're under the system of white supremacy. I thought that over the years we would more and more realize what white supremacy is and how it works and the effect that it has on how non-white people think. So we are programmed to think according to what the white supremacists have taught us, and that's to be monumentally destructive of each other, the victims of white supremacy, like prisoners of war or prisoners of any type. They have a tendency to fight all the time. Fight whom? The prison masters? No, each other. You can ask anybody who's been in a prison. Well, what do you all do? What do you all look forward to doing? Fighting. Cursing each other out all day. I understand that most prisons are real noisy. And they're noisy from what? From people playing guitars or what? Mostly from people talking. And what are they saying when they're talking? Something hostile. Nothing constructive. Nothing that will help anybody do anything of constructive value. It's hostility. Different forms of hostility. This is what I've heard that goes on. So on a world scale, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Black people are just full of hostility. Hostile about what? Everything. Just boiling over. And we laugh to cover it up. Black people do a lot of laughing. You would think we're the happiest people in the world. We're covering up that anxiety, that depression, that hostility. That's what's wrong with me. What's wrong with everybody else? I'm tired of all of this. All of this what? I don't know. Just tired of being tired. Like Fannie Lou Hamer said. I mean, something's wrong. Everything is wrong. Ain't nothing right. I'm going to kill my mother. Maybe that'll straighten something out. That's the way many of us think. Some of us haven't reached that point yet. But it's there. The seed is there because the white supremacists put it there. In many cases, before we were born, because they put it in our forefathers before we were born. The white supremacist system goes back a long ways.
Yes, it does. All right, Corey. Thank you. Thank you so much for your call. Appreciate that. Mr. Fuller, you're correct in that last assessment. You said before we were born. I know that I didn't even know what redlining was, and did not discover that I was a victim of redlining until I was in my 50s, when I went back and looked at the neighborhood that I was in and why we couldn't go past certain streets and why most of us were directed into certain areas. I didn't know there was such a thing as redlining. So you're correct. A lot of this stuff is done before we were known. That's why we're victims. And speaking of victims, let me do this. This is from Edward. He said this, Mr. Fuller, you made a profound statement on November the 22nd show that hit me like a ton of bricks. You said that black people's value system is not compatible with justice. Now, Mr. Fuller, could you please explain or elaborate on how that statement, which was made in the last 25 minutes of the show, what did you mean by that?
Well, first of all, you look at the words, like the code says. First of all, you look at the words. Then you look at the definitions. What is the compensatory definition of justice? It's guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's got to be a guarantee in order to have justice. Nobody can be mistreated. And the second part, the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in every area of activity, the most constructive help. That's in economics. People have needs in economics. Economics is how time and energy is used, and includes money and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ownership, whatever that means, et cetera. Education. Do you know the things that you need to know? That's all education is. Knowing what you need to know at the time you need to know it in order to produce the most constructive results. If you don't have that, you're not educated. Okay. Entertainment. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, no, black people, we dominate the entertainment field. No, we don't. And some entertainers will tell you that, who are black, who really know what the real deal is when it comes to, quote, unquote, who are the masters of entertainment on this planet. What is entertainment? Who decides that? Somebody white. Mm-hmm. In the system of white supremacy. I mean, we're going to have a party. Yeah, that's black people talking. We didn't know what a party was until the white supremacists told us. And what do we do when we have a party? Now, we got our own spin on a party, but the white supremacists said if black people have a party, it better benefit the system of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So we oblige them with that. A lot of black parties consist of what? Gunfire.
Yep.
And then on and on and on through the other 9 areas of activity. Now, I don't want to lose track of what the question was. Mm-hmm. So I cut it off there.
That's okay. All righty. Tell you what we're going to do before we go to you, Swab. We're going to take a little station break. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show, the CRCS with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact again with the show, just dial this number or however you do it nowadays, 516-453-9921, and make sure that if you have a question or comment, you want to press the number 1 button so that you can get in line, and your call will be answered accordingly. If you're a new caller, please let the call screener know that you are a first-time caller, and we have a special program set up for you that you can be heard, and I will announce it, new caller alert. So make sure you do that. The chat room is now available. I want to say that whatever the situation was has been worked out, but I'm not sure. But I do know that it is open for business, and as usual, Constructive Action Items has posted a review of last week's show, so you may want to give a listen. But there are others that are in there, and SWA helped me out by joining the chat room so I can make sure that we're up and running good. So, yeah, get in the chat room if you have, if you want to see what's going on, or join the chat. I would ask, please, ma'am, please, sir, and you've been good on this, but don't use the chat room to ask me a question, to ask Mr. Fuller. That is what the number, the 516 number is for, and we try to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard on that line. So, yeah, you can do that. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, at gmail.com. That's 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And I can't say for sure that your question will be read today, but we're efforting to make sure that you get on. Important of note, if you missed Mr. Fuller on the Carl Nelson Show, the fine staff here at ProduceJustice.com has set up a link where you can hear Mr. Fuller's interview. It was from 8 until 10 a.m. on last Thursday, December the 1st. It was an excellent interview. I mean, excellent. And for those of you who want to venture, that's at ProduceJustice.com. Now, for those of you who want to venture to hear the entire interviews, which is 4 hours, there was an interview that prior to Mr. Fuller by Dr. James Small that went into great detail about what Kyrie Irvin was talking about, the Hebrew Israelites, with documented and archaeological evidence of what he was saying. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about asking Mr. Fuller, since he was born a little while ago, what was the so-called Middle East called before it was named the Middle East. Yeah, I'd like to know that myself. But anyway, Dr. Small went into great historical detail about that particular region and all that. So it's a very compelling information. And then when Mr. Fuller came on, it just, man, it was a slam dunk. It was so good. So check that out. By the way, that first 2 hours is on Carl Nelson Show archives. I believe that's WOL. What is that, Mr. Fuller? WOL 1450 AM? Is that what that is?
1450 AM and 95, I believe.
0.5, yeah, on the FM, yeah.
95.9 FM.
Oh, 0.9? Okay, all right.
That's radio.
Yeah, that's radio, terrestrial radio.
WOL radio.
Mm-hmm.
Radio 1, Dr. Cathy Hughes.
Yes. Yeah, well, that entire interview is on there, and I listened to it again, and they did edit out the commercials, so it's not 4 hours, but it is tremendous, so you might want to check that out. Also, while you're checking things out, don't forget to get the books that Mr. Fuller has published by going also to ProduceJustice.com. Very, very good. Word Guide, 1984 edition, and the edition that we have
the
here.
Word Guide is 2010.
Yeah, 2010. Okay. Yeah, the Word Guide is 2010. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to the questions, and we're going to go out to L.A. My man, SWA, let me see if I can get you in here, and you are in. Go ahead, SWA. Wait a minute. There we go. All right, SWA, good morning.
Greetings, Mr. Bobby. Greetings, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., my associate wants to know if non-white people should consider themselves as citizens.
Citizens of what? That would be the question.
Let me see.
I guess.
Citizens of the
we shouldn't consider ourselves, we're prisoners of war. So prisoners of war are not citizens of anything. We're just prisoners of war. So it comes down to, if we're going to use the word citizenship, citizens, we have to ask a question. Citizens of what? And what is a citizen? The victim of white supremacy is the label that I have that's accurate if I'm going to tell the truth. And this is on the back of the book when I introduce myself, on the back of the book, the textbook for victims of white supremacy. I identify myself as victim of white supremacy. That is my identity. I do not have another identity greater than that. I've never had. Truth be told, I would say that under oath anywhere. If I was I always say that we're always in court and everybody's on trial, including Neely Fuller. But if I was in what they call a courtroom and I was asked by a judge, the judge requested me to tell the truth about my identity, I would tell the judge what I think the judge would want to hear, and that is what name I go by. And I would say Neely Fuller Jr., and he would ask me, do I have another identifying name that's really the truth about who I am, who is Neely Fuller Jr., victim of white supremacy. I'm more that than I have ever been anything, and I'm still that. I've had a lot of titles, like everybody's got a title, bus driver, and if you're riding a bus, you're a bus rider, that's a title. If you're a pedestrian, when you get off the bus, pedestrian means a person walking, okay? So I guess that's what it means. So I got the word correct. So that's who you are. That's a title. But if my major title is not citizen of anything, I'm a victim and a prisoner here in the year 2022. Prisoner of what? The system of white supremacy. A prisoner of war. White supremacy is war. I was born a prisoner. That's why it's so difficult for me to find out anything, even about myself. Because I was born in prison. Someone born in prison knows very little about anything. They just talk to other prisoners who know very little about anything if they were born in prison. So everything comes under the prison master. But in answer to the question, I would have to answer that question by asking a question. Citizen of what?
Okay. All right, Suave. There you go. And thank you for your call, and also thank you for verifying that the chat room is available. Thank you, Suave, out in L.A. All righty. Mr. Fuller, Anita wrote this. She said this, Mr. Fuller, should victims of racism use the word diversity in discussions around racism? Now, here's what Webster's definition of diversity is: the practice or quality including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. Equality and diversity should be supported for their own sake. She said that came from Webster's. So the question again is, excuse me, should victims of racism use the word diversity in discussions around racism?
Yes and no. It depends on the procedure for finding out what it means. Now, the caller has said that that's a dictionary definition. But I have found from experience, and this is why it's in the code, always ask the person who is using any word, the person who uses the word, ask that person, what does that person mean when they say what the word means? Because different people have their own idea about what a word means. I found that out, and that's why when I made up a word guide, I started putting my own definitions to what a word means. So I always know what I'm doing. A word is nothing but a tool. And if you don't like the dictionary definition, like I didn't like the dictionary definition for justice, so I made up one. That's not the dictionary definition. I've never seen one that said what I'm saying, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. I've never read that in any dictionary or encyclopedia. I made it up. And I'm saying it's the best definition because I did not understand any of the other definitions for the word justice. I simply didn't understand it. I said, I'm not going to use nothing that I can't understand. I said, well, what am I going to use? So under compensatory law, I'll use something that I know what I'm doing.
Yes, sir.
When I say something, I mean what I say because I understand what I'm saying.
Okay. All righty. And the second part to the question is, can a white supremacist be poor or rich? Depends on what those words mean. That's another thing I found out down through the years. I mean, there's a song that says, I'll be as rich as Rockefeller on the sunny side of the street. Gold dust at my feet on the sunny side of the street. Now, that's a person that was walking on the non-sunny side of the street and say, this rover crossed over to the sunny side of the street and say, now I'm rich as Rockefeller. Gold dust is at my feet. Why? Because I'm on the sunny side of the street. I mean, so it depends on who you talk to, who's rich and who's poor. I've heard black people say, we didn't have nothing out there in the country in that little shack we were in. But we didn't know that we didn't have nothing. And so we were happy out there. I've heard a lot of people say that. That we thought we were rich. We had plenty of food on the table. I had a couple of pair of overalls. I had shoes on my feet. I didn't have one pair. And I had some cardboard in the bottom of them. But I'd never seen all these people that had what they call good shoes. Everybody around me, I mean, had shoes that were worn out. But we didn't even think about it. I've heard many a person say that. And I have witnessed some of it. And I've also been around long enough to have been there myself. So it depends on who you talk to and what they say. You can ask a person. That's the best way. Are you rich? You know, and the person might say, I ain't nowhere near rich. Because Mr. What's this person supposed to be the richest person in the world? Mr. Musk, M-U-S-K, I believe. All right. Yeah. Now that's what a lot of people would consider to be rich, and their standards, and they would be telling the truth, is that until I get as much money as Mr. Musk, I ain't rich. And then there are other people who say, oh no, I got a good woman. That's all I need. That's all I need. The woman that I got rich when I got her. Okay.
And he's telling the truth. Because he's talking about it from what? His viewpoint.
His viewpoint, yes, sir. Okay. Makes me wonder about Mansa Musa, the richest person and happened to be a black man that the world has ever recorded. Mr. Fuller, before we go on to Darnell in New York, I think I asked a question during the last break about what was the so-called Middle East called before it was the Middle East. Do you know? Since you
I have no idea.
Okay,
I have no idea, and I really don't know if if a person said, as a matter of life and death, what is the Middle East, Neely Fuller?
Yeah.
I could not answer that question. I would not venture to answer that question because my life is on the line. I couldn't answer that question. At one time, I've heard that Ethiopia is a part of the Middle East. And then sometimes it ain't. So, and I say, well, I've heard that Ethiopia is in what they call Africa. They say, well, it ain't this week because I heard it on the radio. I mean, it's a part of the Middle East. Got Middle East influences. So I just gave up. Too many times I've run across that controversy, Middle East.
Well, I was asking because prior to 1948, when the so-called Middle East was created, I was wondering what was it called? I mean, the land was there, and I heard different theories of how it became and I'm using air quotes, the so-called Middle East, which I personally don't believe. But I was wondering, since you were alive when all this, and are alive, but were alive when all that went down, I was wondering what it was like, since I have nobody else except for books to tell me what it was like. So I thought I would hear it from somebody who lived through that. And you say you cannot answer that, or you don't know, or won't answer it, or whatever. Your life is on the line, or something like that.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm just giving that as an illustration.
Okay.
If someone asked me right now, and it's a matter of life and death, name all of the so-called places that are part of the Middle East, Neely Fuller. I could not do that because all down through the years, I've heard different people say different things about what the Middle East is. I've even read different things. Like I read somewhere where Ethiopia was a part of the Middle East. And when I looked at a map, I mean, so how much of Africa is a part of the Middle East? I mean, and it's Africa. See what I mean?
Yes, sir. I see what you mean.
Of anybody, I mean, somebody who has a map available right now, just look and see how many parts of Africa are part of the Middle East.
Yeah.
Because every now and then it turns up that way.
Right. Part of the reason that I asked that question is because when I was doing some of my studies, in particular about the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, when the continent of Africa was divided by 14 or 15 nations. I wondered about that, and the names of those nations are on there under Bismarck and destroying of the Ottoman Empire. I just was wondering about that. How did the Middle East come into so-called existence in 1948, supposedly? All right. Well, anyway, we'll move on from there. Anybody, particularly in the chat room, if you know that information, I'm looking for that. Darnell, get ready. Get ready, Darnell, in New York. Ready? Here we go. Darnell, you are on with Mr. Fuller. There you go.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Mr. Bobby, I have a VZQ and a question, if that's okay.
Yes, okay, sir.
I noticed that the victims of the system of white supremacy today, they have a lot more luxuries and comforts compared to a century ago. And I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller, what progress has the victims of white supremacy made from 1922 to 2022?
You're talking about non-white people. What progress have they made?
Yes, in the last century.
Not according to the code. We haven't made any. That's according to the code. So the code says, what is progress for victims of white supremacy? Progress, by definition, for victims of white supremacy is the system of white supremacy no longer exists, and the system of justice has taken its place. In the year 2022, that should be the only standard by which non-white people should measure progress. White supremacy has been replaced with the system of justice. It no longer exists. That's what you call, quote, unquote, progress for all non-white people according to compensatory counter-racist logic. Nothing else is acceptable.
Okay. And what was your VGQ, Darnell?
The VGQ was the statement that I made in the beginning about how I noticed that the victims of today, they have more luxuries and comforts, creature comforts, than as compared to a century ago.
Okay. All right, VGQ. All right, thank you, Darnell. You are so
no
good
problem.
for the show. Mr. Fuller, Mr. Smith, hang on, George and Cleo. Mr. Smith wrote this, said this. Smith Jr. said this. Good afternoon, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, in your opinion, and only in your opinion, Mr. Fuller, is there such a thing as a reformed, racist, white supremacist? I'll listen carefully for your answer.
I don't know. I don't know what that means. So the answer is I don't know. I have no idea. Reformed white supremacists. I don't know what that means. It's not in my word guide. I do know that. And I wouldn't have a definition for it that would make sense. Reformed white supremacists. I have no idea how I even handle that. Whomever uses the term, now if I hear a person, I know what the code says about that. If I hear a white person say that he or she is a reformed white supremacist, I would immediately do what the code says. Ask that person, what does that mean? Because I don't use the term.
Okay.
The code says always ask the person who uses the term, what does the term mean? That person, even if you have an idea of what it might mean, that doesn't register according to codified procedure. Codified procedure is you always ask the person who is using the term what the term means to them and what they intend for that term to mean to others when they use the term talking to others. That's the procedure. That way you will always get less confusion.
Okay. Wow. All righty. Speaking about less confusion, let's clear this up. Mr. Fuller, talk about your book here in the remaining moments that we have in the first hour.
You can get the textbook for victims of white supremacy by going to producejustice.com. And when you open that textbook, what is supposed to help you as a victim of white supremacy do is how to get through each and every day different parts of the book in different areas of activity, and whatever you do and say, how to use your time and energy in the best possible manner according to logic in being a victim of white supremacy. What do you do and say that will help you as a victim of white supremacy gradually not be a victim of white supremacy by eroding the system of white supremacy from inside the system, if you want to use that as a slang term.
Mm-hmm.
The system of white supremacy is a prison system. So what you do, you don't try to break out of the system because that can't be done. What you do with the system of white supremacy, since it's a complete world system, it's no breaking out of it and leaving it behind. You have to erode the system itself, actually destroy the system. Even though you're in the system, you destroy it within, from the inside out, until there's no more system. And replace it. You just don't want to destroy something unless you have something to replace it with. And it tells you how, as you go along, you replace it with a system of justice through the establishment of what the code book calls the universal man, the universal woman. And so that all people practice a thing called justice, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in every area of activity. No exceptions. That's the kind of world that should be. Not a world dominated by mistreating people based on color. That's what the white supremacists get their glory from. That's what it's all about. And that runs the entire system called the world relationships between all people. That's the dominant feature of it. It's rotten from top to bottom in every way that has to do with relations between people. Now, the system of white supremacy is the most successful system in producing things, but it is the worst possible system you can have for interrelations between people.
Yes, sir.
Because it's based on mistreat people based on color. The color of a person's skin is the dominant political system of planet Earth. That's an absolute disgrace to the Creator and everything else of any worthy value.
Okay. Alrighty. And we can get the book?
By going to producejustice.com. It's addressed to the individual person, so you don't have to have no crowd of people with you tell you what to do every day, or you don't have to have any maximum leader. The leader is the logic that came with the universe. Keep that in mind when you're talking about the compensatory code. You become the leader. The leader of whom? Yourself. And then give people the recipe of becoming the leader of themselves, so that then everybody becomes a leader and a follower of what? Of logic, which the Creator put into the universe. Constructive logic.
Okay.
Don't leave out that word constructive.
Constructive. Okay. All righty. Before we move on, Mr. Fuller, have you ever heard, since you lived through this, of the, real nice, Mr. Bobby, the Balfour Declaration?
I've heard of it.
Do you know what that is?
I've forgotten what it means.
Oh, okay. Quickly, the Balfour Declaration was a letter written by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lionel Walter Rothschild, in which he expressed the British government's support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Somebody in the chat, and I cannot pronounce their name, so I'm not going to mess it up, said that Libya was used as a model for replacing the state of Palestine with the state of Israel. Okay, thank you. I would give your name, but I know that I'll butcher that, but thank you for that information. Okay, we got about Libya. Okay, Libya. Oh, I'm sorry, Liberia. Thank you. Thank you so much. What did I say, Libya? I meant Liberia. Let me get that straight because we don't want to cause confusion. Liberia was used as a model for replacing the state of Palestine with the state of Israel, Liberia. Thank you for listening. Chatters, you are really something else. Okay, George in Toronto, Cleo, I am going to get to you, but we only have 3 minutes remaining in this segment, so I'm going to have to pick you up on the flip or the top of the hour. We'll do that. So in the remaining 3 minutes to close out this segment, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to give that to you to express whatever you need to express before we go into the second hour.
Well, what I was doing, I was just waiting on people to call in, since there's so many people who are waiting to call in.
They're there.
But I'll just say, in the interim, what I always say when I'm going into the next hour, I'll just say, get the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And the best way to read it is not to sit down and try to read it from front to back at one time, or even read it continuously from one area of activity to another, because the book is segmented in 9 areas of activity. But just pick the book up every now and then, because most people are busy anyway. You don't have time to sit down and read books. I know I don't. I don't have time to even sit down and review my own book, which I need to do. So I just pick it up myself. And like I do with most books, I just pick it up and turn to a page and see if I can pick up anything that will kindle a constructive thought, that will give a little boost to a constructive thought. Because I'm always looking to think constructively. So when my mind kind of goes blank or something like that, I just pick up my own book, or I pick up any book that I'm near and try to pick up something to think about. Everything starts with a thought that may lead to something else, and then something else, another thought, and another thought, and another thought, that then will lead to constructive action. And you can kind of wire yourself as a part of your code to do that. Just pick up a book and try to keep books around you or newspapers or whatever it is, that give information of some type that may have constructive value. I mean, if you have a lot of books, and I have a lot of them, most books have something in them, but some books have more than others. I kind of close out with that. Some books have more constructive information in them than others. So try to, if you're going to have them and keep them and store them, because you got so much stuff, okay? But if you're going to have books, try to have the books that have the most information in it that may be of constructive value. So if you turn to any page, you pick up something that you say, oh, I read this before, but I forgot it. And now that I remember it, I'm going to use this. In fact, I can use this today when I go on the job. I was thinking about what to say at that meeting. This would be an excellent thing to say. It's just because you happen to turn to a page that led to an idea, that led to another idea, that led to another idea that was bingo.
All righty. Well, guess what? we have come to the end of the first hour, so thank you for listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. But we have one more hour to go. So, as I always try to say, stick and stay, don't go away, because the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show will begin with Mr. Neely Fuller and Mr. Bobby will begin right now. All righty, right now. Thank you again for visiting us and for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby, and we do sincerely thank you for listening. Now, we would like for you to be a participant in today's show, and you do that by calling 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button if you have a call, as George in Toronto and Cleo in Houston have done. Make sure you give the call screener your name, the person in the 215 area code, so that I can properly give you an introduction without messing your name up. I don't want to do that, but anyway, give that information. And for first-time callers, listen, you're new to the program. You're probably not going to get it right away. But if you have a question, go ahead and dial that number. Give your name to the call screener, and be sure to tell the call screener that this is your first time, or you are a new caller, and they will alert me, and then we give you the new caller treatment, and you will be heard today. As Justin Wilson would say in Louisiana, guaranteed. But you will be heard today. You can ask your question, and you won't have to be scared. Just be brief, and so that Mr. Fuller can, and clear, so that Mr. Fuller can answer your question in an appropriate manner. You can also go into the chat room, but now don't ask no questions for Mr. Fuller in there, but you can go to blogtalkradio.com. And when you do, you want to go to programs and hit that, and the Produce Justice show will come up. Hit that, and then you can go into the chat room, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's some good information that is in there, or information, whatever. It's in there. You can get it, take it or leave it, but ponder it, and here's some things. Construction action items usually gives a recall of last week's show so that you can be up to date as to what's happening, and also good conversations in there that you can listen to, corrections and so forth. So be good. And this right here, you can also Gmail me for a question that you would like for me to ask Mr. Fuller, and that is the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And when I get it, I will give you the symbol that I am using to let you know that your Gmail has been received, and at an appropriate time when the show is at a certain point, it will be read. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Thank you, Ngozi from Philly, for giving me that. Hopefully I didn't mess up your name either. All righty, so let's get on with the show. And oh yeah, don't forget, all the books and materials can be obtained by going to ProduceJustice.com. That's ProduceJustice.com. And if you missed it, shame on you. ProduceJustice.com also has Mr. Neely Fuller's interview with Carl Nelson, the Carl Nelson Show. It is minus the commercials. Robert and Company have established a link where you can hear the interview that Mr. Fuller had on last week's Carl Nelson Show. It is very, 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 very good, even more very than that. And if you would like that, you can also go to, I think it's WOL, the Carl Nelson Show, and get the first 2 hours of the show when Dr. James Paul was on and spoke about the Hebrew Israelites and what Kyrie Irvin spoke about with evidence, archaeological, historical evidence, facts. The man has facts. I listened to it. It is something, and checked it out too, by the way. Not just took his word, but checked it out. Check out that interview so that you can be informed and know what's going on. And then, of course, Mr. Fuller came on, and boy, it was icing on the cake, whatever you want to call it. It was tremendous. It was tremendous. Oh yeah. Anyway, so you want to make sure that you're able to do that. Okay, George in Toronto, get ready. I'm getting ready to come to you right now. Let me see if I can buffer you up. Okay, George, you are there. Okay. Good morning, George. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Oh, hi, Mr. Bobby. Hi, Mr. Fuller. I just wanted to ask, when speaking about the system of racism, white supremacy, the local global system that all non-white people are subject to, are you ever supposed to consider it an artificial man-made construct that is both a social, scientific, and political system? Mr. Fuller?
The question is what?
When you're describing the system of racism, white supremacy to a non-white person, is it appropriate to call it an artificial man-made construct?
An artificial
man-made construct.
You can call it that.
Because it's not really real, but the white supremacists made it to put non-white people in it, but they've also trapped themselves in it because they're stuck on the earth. I mean, they are looking to go to another planet since they turned the whole entire world into a prison system. But I'm just trying to figure out different ways that I could explain it to non-white people and also to all white people.
Well, you can show them the definition that's in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. You can explain it the way that I explain it on these programs, or you can explain it in any way that they'll understand what you're talking about. It just means people who are classified as white dominate and mistreat people who are classified as non-white. That's a simple way of putting it. A whole system for doing that and to benefit from that domination. People classified as white dominate and mistreat people who are not white for the benefit of people who are white. Very simple.
Okay.
Dominate and mistreat in everything that you can name. All areas of activity. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex. Dominate and mistreat people, everybody who is classified as not being white for the benefit of people who classify themselves as white. That's what white supremacy is. Dominate and mistreat people of color. Just repeat that over and over again. It's simple. It's straightforward. Doesn't call for a lot of confidence. And you can say it in any way that the person understands what you're saying in any language. Just say it that way. Should be clear. Keep it simple. Like anything that you say, try to keep it as simple and straight to the point as you possibly can. That's compensatory codification at its best.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Thank you, George. Thank you for your question. Mr. Fuller, Jane wrote this. She said recently a man in France won a court case and was awarded over 3,000 euros after being fired for not attending mandatory after-hour work events. The man chose not to participate because his co-workers engaged in over-drinking, simulated sexual acts, sharing beds with co-workers during seminars, and name-calling. Now, Mr. Fuller, I remember what you said about no celebrations. I don't know if the Frenchman is white or non-white, but he stayed on code by leaving a celebration that was not constructive. Mr. Fuller, did he do the right thing by not attending the mandatory events? Or is it best to stay on code even if one gets fired? This is from a longtime listener, Jane.
Well, you always try to get it. When you get a job, you try to keep that job until you get ready to leave. Now, if any situation on the job displeases you, you talk to the people that you asked to be on the job. They're in charge. And in a racial situation, it's always the white supremacists. So you go to the white supremacists like you have to do. If you're a prisoner of war, you ask the prison masters for whatever you want, and you tell them why you want it. That's why I use the movie Shawshank Redemption a lot. And that's a simple way of learning about prisons and maybe what to do and what not to do, sometimes just in the form of a movie. And the character in the movie was called Andy Dufresne, and anything that he wanted, for the most part, he asked fellow prisoners first, but usually they didn't have what he wanted. There was one fellow prisoner who he went to, a black person. He was white, Andy Dufresne was, and asked him for little small items, which that black person, even as a prisoner, could smuggle into the prison. And was taking a chance on doing that, and that's questionable. But he was actually doing that. But anything major that he wanted, he went to the logical people to talk to. He went to the people who run everything, who make the big decisions, and told those people what he wanted. So that's what, in answer to the question, that's what this person in what he called France should have done, which is what apparently he did. Go to the person who has the power to get things done and say whatever it is that you want and why you want it and what it is you don't want and why you don't want it, and then act accordingly. That's the compensatory process. That's the name for that. Making up for what's missing. Something that's missing that needs to be filled. Fulfilled. You don't have justice. That's missing. Justice is something that you should have. So you go to the person who is in position to do the most to produce what it is you're asking for. That's just a simple procedure. It's the codified procedure. It's the logical procedure. Always, always, always follow the logic in anything that you say or do. Logic just means the best way to go about getting something done. That's all logic is.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to Cleo and Houston. Get ready, Cleo. Here we come. All righty. As we work through these issues here. Go ahead, Cleo. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, everyone. Long live NFJ and forever live Logic. As always, I'm so appreciative to you, Mr. Bobby, Robert, Sharon, and Moon Pie for your partnership with NFJ in this very important life work. Mr. Fuller, in light of your insight into the white supremacy strategies of mass confusion, deception, and black faces up front. What is your analysis of the influx of commercials with homosexual, lesbian, and biracial relationships depicting blacks expressing affection in the people activity area of sex?
To the extent that a racist has anything to do with it, and according to the code, the racist has to do with everything that involves non-white people. They're the masters of non-white people. It is to make the system of white supremacy stronger. Particularly, they are really forcing that in the area of sex. They're making sure, right down to the finest detail, that they control and master and direct everything that people of color do in the area of sex. Why? The sex drive is very strong. So they have decided they are going to engineer the sexual activities of the non-white people of the planet in such a way that it is in complete disarray, that it's fractionalized, it's all over the place, that it is non-constructive. That's the basic word. Sexual activities among non-white people are supposed to be 100% non-constructive and 100% in support of the system of white supremacy by making the system of white supremacy stronger in the area of sex and all other areas, and making the non-white people weaker than they are now in the area of sex and all other areas. Because once you weaken people in the area of sex, you will automatically weaken them in every other area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, and war. You get control of a person's sexual activity, you got automatic control, greater control. They already have control, but if they want really solid control, go after black people sexually. Disable them, confuse them to the max, have them all over the place, scatterbrain, their behavior being just off the hook, non-constructive, have no idea of what they're doing or why they're doing it, just doing stuff. And the white supremacists sit back and say, hey, we got them in the area of sex. We got the steering wheel when it comes to that. It's real easy to control them in religion, in economics, in education. They'll just be all over the place in all these other areas. Mm-hmm. Nothing that they do will make sense. And because sex is so strong, the sexual urge. So if you can control a person through their minds of what sex is, boy, you got them in everything. And the white supremacists are successfully doing that to the non-white people of this planet, all over this world, and they are doing it in grand fashion right in front of everybody's eyes, and very few people can see through it. Very few.
Very few. Mm-hmm.
It's one of the most devastating things that the white supremacists are now doing in the year 2022 against the people of color of this planet.
Sexual confusion. Huh?
Sexual confusion. That's the order of the day. Cause cause more confusion in the area of sex than you do in any other area, and you got those other areas sold up tight.
All right, Cleo, thank you for your call. Mr. Fuller, this comes from Sean. He says this. Mr. Fuller, employers are being encouraged to create a workplace environment where there is a condition called, quote, psychological safety, end of quote. Psychological safety is a condition that creates the feeling/belief that anyone can feel free to express who they are in the workplace without the fear of being punished or otherwise negatively impacted for their expression. I have concluded, Mr. Fuller, that racism, white supremacy is maintained from the purposeful holding of psychological safety from non-white/black people. As long as racism, white supremacy exist, non-white black people cannot have psychological safety at any time. Mr. Fuller, would the best codified response for workplace requirements to participate in, quote, psychological safety, end of quote, efforts be to ask the 4 questions to obtain clarity?
To ask the 4 questions?
Yeah,
which 4 questions?
171, 172.
Oh, you can ask that. Sure. That's the go-to. Page 171, 172, you ask, first of all, the questions to yourself. That's how it's listed in the book. But then you can branch out from that, because this is a guide, the textbook for victims of white supremacy, and ask everybody those same questions. What do you want? Everybody wants something. Evidently, in this thing that he's talking about happening on the job, you say, okay, what do you want to do? Because it comes down to doing. What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to do it? How do you plan for me to do it? Or, how do you plan to do it? How does anybody plan to do it? And then that last question, which is the punchline, to use a slang expression. What do you expect the constructive result to be of everything that you said? And you can end every meeting like that. Sir, ma'am, what do you expect the constructive result to be? What do you expect the constructive result to be? That's what you ask them. But you also ask everybody else that same question, because everybody might not have the same answer, including yourself. What does everybody in this room expect the constructive result to be of what is being proposed here? And you can ask each person as an individual, if you're going to do it what they call in the democratic way. What's the constructive result now? All this stuff that y'all going to be doing, is it going to be constructive or non-constructive? Because it ain't but 2 categories. There ain't no wiggle room there. See, and then you can follow up with even more detailed questions. Constructive how? In what way is this going to be constructive? And don't argue about the answer. Just be ready with the next question. And that procedure, according to the code, will always lead everybody not to where they want to go, but where they should be.
Where they should be, yes.
Yeah, the code is designed that way with those questions.
Psychological safety, I've never heard of that, but that, now maybe it's just me, but that sounds like something that I don't necessarily think I would trust, because they're saying, according to this text here, that you basically can say what you want and do what you want, unless I'm interpreted it wrong, and nothing will be held against you. And I guess it's being authorized by those who are in charge. In your opinion, hearing just based on what you just heard, would that be something that you think that you could invest in or trust?
I would just immediately go to, like I said, I just got through going into it at great length. Go to page 171 and 172 of the textbook and ask those 4 questions. It's about wants, W-A-N-T-S. Everybody wants something, including on a job. You want the job. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then you want something on the job. And then you want certain things to happen and not happen on the job. But keep in mind, everything that happens anywhere, on a job, whatever that means, or anywhere else, any time of day, anywhere on the planet, is divided into 2 types of activity. It's not but 2 types of activity among the people of planet Earth and the creatures of planet Earth and the things of planet Earth. You got all 3 of them there. People, creatures, things. That's all that's on planet Earth. So those things, those people, those creatures are doing something. Even a grain of sand is doing something. It's lying there, all right? That's a thing. Now, is it constructive, the thing that is being done, or non-constructive? It's either improving a situation or it's not. No wiggle room there. And those 4 questions will knock out the wiggle room.
Well, I got that. So so then someone to ask, why do you want to do this? What is your
on those 4 questions?
Yes.
What do you want me to do? That's number 1.
Yes, sir.
Number 2, why do you want me to do it?
Yes, sir.
And every time they answer the question, don't start arguing about the answer. Just move to the next question. Because when you study these answers and put them all together, it's going to come clear whether it's constructive or non-constructive. Why? Because you're going to ask that question. What's constructive about this? And is it non-constructive in any way? And let people answer. Let each individual answer. Because each individual is supposed to have a voice. Because they say, that's what the white supremacists use that word, what? All the time. Democracy. We the people. So you can't leave out no people in giving their answer on why this is constructive. And if it's something non-constructive, that's going to come out in the question.
Yeah, so you're asking, okay, what is the constructive result of me doing this? You're going to ask this question.
Or anybody doing it. Because if anybody does it, it's still got to be constructive or non-constructive, and you don't want nobody around you doing anything that's non-constructive. Because non-constructive activity spreads, and it's going to hit you. It might not start out that way, but it's going to include you. You don't be around a whole lot of wild gunfire. That's an example.
Yes, sir.
15 people that's shooting in every direction. Is that constructive for you to be in that environment? The answer is no.
No.
Unless you like getting shot.
Like you said, the 4 questions. All right, got to leave it there. I'll break it here. You're listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And you know what? we thank you. We thank you for listening. We thank you for your questions, for participating, your chat room conversations, very compelling, very interesting, your Gmails, and also just your phone calls. They have been just outstanding, even with the technical difficulties that we are having today, at least on this end anyway. But we thank you for bearing with us and for hearing us and all that. Now, to get in contact with the show in the remaining 29 minutes, call this number, 516-453-9921. You know the drill. Press the number 1 button if you have a question or a quick, and I mean quick, ma'am, quick, sir, BGQ. Be clear so that Mr. Fuller can answer your question. Now, you know that he uses logic, cause and effect, which means also that when examples are necessary, he will use that, because we don't want anyone to be confused. Don't want that. That's not good. So you can do that. To get into the chat room, all you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com, and where the it says programs, you want to hit that, and the Produce Justice show will come on. Then you hit that, and then a little box comes up where you can get into the chat room. And there are lots of people in that chat room. Yes, there are lots of people, and they've been hot today, very good. Construction action items are often mentioned because she makes sure that whatever we discussed last week is in there so that you can be come up and understand or in review of what's going on, and also with today's chats. Many people are there with many different bits and pieces of information that you may or may not find helpful to you. You can also, if you want to ask a question, you can reach it to me by going to my Gmail account. That is at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. And when I get it, I will give you my symbol to let you know that I have received it. Now, it may not be answered on today's program. More than likely it will not. But at some point in time, I will address it and let you know that Mr. Fuller is answering your question before the machine deletes it. So I'll try to get to those, and we are stacked up in that area too. So your question is there. Okay. Getting the books. If you do not have a copy of Mr. Fuller's books, you need to go to ProduceJustice.com. And all the books are in. I talked to Robert this morning, or even late last night. Woo! All the books are in. So make sure that you get the book to help you out. Now, the book is just suggestions on what to do and what not to do. Yeah, so you want to get that. That's at ProduceJustice.com. And while you are there, you will see past shows or programs that Mr. Fuller and myself have done. They are on there. You can look at that, and particularly last week's program when Mr. Fuller was on the Carl Nelson Show. If you haven't heard that, you need to listen to that. I found it to be very, very, very good. And even the 2 hours before that on the Carl Nelson Show, which we don't have that part, but station WOL, the Carl Nelson Show, it's on there. In fact, the full interview is on there. You can pick that up to see what Dr. James Small had to say in relation to the Hebrew Israelites, giving more definitive action to what Kyrie Irving spoke about. He made it clear. He made it clear with evidence, if you would care to review and look it up. Yeah, never take anybody's word for sure. Look it up for yourself so that you would know. Historical and archaeological evidence. How about that? Now, that's going deep. Unlike the movie Run Silent, Run Deep, this is in there. Check it out. You may or you may not agree with it, but it's there. And then Mr. Fuller comes in, and, baby, that's like icing on the cake. Oh, it's so good. Check it out. Check that out. Okay. All righty. I believe that's it. And don't forget, all the books can be obtained by going to producejustice.com. Okay, here we go. We're getting ready to go to Philly, and Ngozi. I'm going to try to do it. I probably pronounced it wrong, but get ready. Here it comes. Tell me if I got it right. You are now on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
You got it correct, Mr. Bobby. It is Ngozi.
Thank you. Good
morning, Mr. Fuller, and good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning.
My question, Mr. Fuller, is in the system of white supremacy, people are trained to be liars. With people being trained to lie, how can we expect to get the truth through the question and answer process?
Yes. There's no other route. That's the codified answer.
If they lie when we ask question after question after question, how will we get to the truth?
You keep asking questions.
Okay.
That's how the truth comes out about anything. All truth is revealed through the process of questions and answers. There's no other route. See, if there was another route, according to the law of compensation, then you could take that route. There's no other route to finding the truth about anything except through the process of questions and answers. According to what? According to universal logic, which is what the code is supposed to be based on. Logic, cause and effect. Enough questions. How many questions are enough until all problems are solved? Questions, answers. Because every question has an answer. It's just a matter of finding out what the answer is. There's no such thing as a question that doesn't have an answer. The question could not exist if it didn't have an answer. That's the law of the universe. That's the logic.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you, Ngozi. And you don't have to be a stranger. Justice Warrior, the reason why I am doing that, which you apparently do not like, is because it was a compelling interview that Mr. Fuller did with Mr. Carl Nelson, and he only does it about once a month. And I mentioned Professor James Small because the first 2 hours actually fit right into what Mr. Fuller was saying. It's almost like they coordinated it, but they did not. That was made it so good. And then information from Mr. Small is that he was also prominent in the production of The Godfather of Harlem. Have you seen that, Mr. Fuller?
Seen what?
The Godfather of Harlem.
No, I haven't.
Okay, all righty. But I found that out. Carl may not ever promote this show, and guess what? Speaking to Justice Warrior, he doesn't have to. But I promote the show because Mr. Fuller is on there when he's on there. That's why. Okay? That's the way that it is. Okay, Black Mermaid. Black Mermaid in Minnesota. You ready? Here we go. You are on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I was recently at a seminar where the speaker said that the white supremacists are secretly miserable. And the speaker gave an example of the concept called South Africa, where there was apartheid, and South Africa became one of the most armed places on the planet. And the speaker said that means that the white supremacist is miserable. So my question for you, Mr. Fuller, is do you feel like the white supremacist is miserable because they have to hold up this system and always be armed and always be ready for war for this system?
Well, they could be. I would have to be familiar with every white supremacist, and I would have to ask that particular person, white supremacist, if he or she was miserable practicing white supremacy, and just make a judgment as to whether or not I think they're telling the truth. But that might be important to know, I guess. But I hadn't thought about it one way or another. Whether they are miserable about what they do or not. I just know that they do what they do. And what they do are things that shouldn't be done when it comes to non-white people, and that is mistreat them. Now, how they feel about it, I haven't thought about that very much because I don't think it's necessary for me to know that. It would be helpful, maybe, if I could find a way to use that they are miserable doing it. But the only way I know is stop doing it and practice justice. And you can take credit for practicing justice. White supremacy is not necessary to produce a thing called justice. You can bypass that. And it's far more valuable, in my opinion. But to the white supremacists, white supremacy is better than justice. So these questions can be asked of the white supremacists. See, anything that you're thinking about a person or any person that you're talking about, ask the persons. You can get the best answers. What does the code say? Everything, all problems, whatever it is, can be solved or will be solved or can be solved without exception through the process of what? Questions and answers. So you always ask the questions of the person who what? Can give you the correct answer better than anybody else. That's who you always direct the question to. Now, if a white person is miserable, you ask that white person, are you miserable? Why are you miserable? You might have 1,000 questions. But if the basic question is that white person miserable, the best person to ask is that white person who, rumor has it or something, has said that they're miserable. The best person to ask about Neely Fuller's misery is Neely Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
Real simple. Everything in codification is simple. The white supremacists, however, will make everything simple, complicated when it comes to interaction between white and non-white people.
Yes, they
will. They take
That's
simple things and deliberately make them complicated.
That was the word I was going to use, deliberate. To do what? To cause confusion.
Cause confusion. Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
When you make something complicated, you are intending. And you're doing it intentionally, you're intending to cause confusion.
Right.
Why? Because people that you can confuse, you can dominate. That's the best path.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. The Black Mermaid, thank you for your call. Thank you so much. It reminds me of what? The Black Eagle? Who's that? Joe Madison? Yeah, that's the Black Eagle there. Okay, new caller. A new caller alert. from D.C., David. Get ready, David. I'm going to clue you in here, or whatever I'm going to do here. We're having just a little technical difficulty, but I believe it might be on my end where the usual suspects are in play. But, David, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bob and Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
Just had a quick question. I was curious, Mr. Fuller, what might be an example of the most constructive work against white supremacy, like an example that you may have seen throughout the years, a clear-cut example of, black people taking some sort of action against white supremacy, if you can put a finger on that.
Now the question is, what is the example of black people taking action against white supremacy?
Something, right, a constructive action, something that you've seen that you agreed with and said if more actions like these were taken, we might be getting somewhere.
Well, it's a collection of things. Anything that a black person has done that was of constructive value was something that was going to be harmful to the system of white supremacy. If a black person, a non-white person, was doing it. And so that would be millions of things. And so what we want to do is be consistent in doing all things, anything that we do as best we can, have constructive value. Just ask that question. Is this thing that we're doing, is it constructive or non-constructive? Because the white supremacists depend on black people doing more non-constructive things than constructive things, and making all of those constructive things that black people do serve the system of white supremacy. Anything that helps black people to improve themselves, the white supremacists are against.
Right.
Anything that black people do that's constructive for black people, the white supremacists are absolutely opposed to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's keeping it real simple.
Keeping it real
Just
simple.
look at whatever a black person is doing and saying, now is this black person is doing whatever it is I'm looking at them doing, is this helping to improve their situation and the people around them, helping to improve them, make them more constructive than they are? Or is it helping them to do something non-constructive, tearing them down, and or the black person doing something non-constructive that's hurting that black person who's doing it? That's the way the white supremacists want it. A black person is never supposed to do anything constructive unless it's something that the white person directs them to do for the benefit of a white person. Not ever.
Alrighty, David. Since you are a new caller alert, do not be a stranger, my friend. Thank you so much for your call. All right, Mr. Fuller. Whoop, there goes my screen again. Dark. Let me see if I can get it back. Okay, here it is. All right, it says this is from overseas in the concept called the United Kingdom. Mr. Fuller, I've heard you address this issue about black people calling themselves a race. The white supremacists have duped many of us into calling ourselves a race. We cannot be animals and primitive beings according to the white supremacist while being a, quote, race. the racists use the same argument to say that they are supreme over black people, but black people can also be, quote, black supremacists. I think that black speakers who refer to us as the, quote, black race, end of quote, should desist from using that term because it is not true. There is no proof that black people operate and function as a race. For me, how a race functions is equivalent to an ant colony where every ant on that colony is working towards the single objective, which is to maintain and expand the colony. The white race functions with a single objective to expand, or rather to a single objective to establish, maintain, expand, and refine their operation called white supremacy. In 2022, black people as a group based on our color do not have a single group objective at all. We are scattered to the four corners of the earth. I would go as far as saying that some of us who look black don't even want to be identified as being black at all. We would rather be identified as something else to get away from blackness. Mr. Fuller, Jr., I would be grateful for your comments. Kind regards, Anthony from England.
Well, that wasn't a question, but I do have comments. I don't know if he has a textbook for victims of white supremacy or not, but that's right out of the textbook. Most of what he said is right in the textbook for victims of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it sounded like it was word for word.
I hope not.
Maybe he got that from reading the textbook,
okay,
or he heard it being said on the program or something. But part of what he was saying sounds like it's partial quotes from right out of the textbook.
Mm-hmm.
So my comment would be, to most of what he's saying, yes, to what the white supremacists are doing. Because I think collectively, everything that he was saying, they just dominate black people on the basis of color by inventing a thing called race and racism. The white supremacists are the usual suspects for having invented it. Somebody invented it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people can argue about who was the first person to come up with the idea, but the usual suspects would be the white supremacists because they are the best at it. And everybody else seems to be more tribalistic. People brag about their tribes or their village or what they're built around some person that they say was their guide, their leader. But the white supremacists said, we build everything around being white.
Mm-hmm.
All right? We don't care what you all do, because when you build everything around being white and make that strong, that has turned out to be the most powerful idea that anybody has ever come up with for dominating and controlling people. And we thought of an idea of doing it on the basis of color.
Yes.
Color. And we put everybody else in complete disarray with that one single idea. If you're white, you're always right about everything. And if you're a person of color, every move that you make is of doubtful value. Very simple formula.
Very simple formula.
The most powerful idea ever come up for controlling people.
All righty. All right. Well, that was the call from England, or the concept called the United Kingdom or England, whatever you want to call it. So many names. But this is the last caller, and this is a new caller. This is Fred from Honolulu. Fred, I'm getting ready to cue you in. Thanks for your call already. Wait a minute. What's going on? Oh, here we go. All right, Fred from Honolulu. You are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Okay. Thank you so much for taking my call, Mr. Bobby. Thank you so much. My question is, I'm so nervous right now. My question is, Mr. Fuller, why is it that black people in the system of white supremacy cannot criticize other victims of white supremacy?
Because it doesn't produce a constructive result. You'll tell the truth about events that happen, but not in the form of a criticism, because the white supremacists determine what black people do or don't do. It's like we have controversies about somewhat, I won't call his name, it's a he, a black person right now. There's no controversy there according to the code. Everything he's saying and doing, this person, who right now is in the news, kind of prominent. In fact, there's several black people. So you can pick either one, any one of them. And you can say, well, these are things that shouldn't be done. These things are that the person is doing and saying. Well, it's under the system of white supremacy. And whom did they get it from? Whatever they're doing. See, black people are under the firm grip of their teachers. I'm under the firm grip of my teacher. My teacher taught me about white supremacy. And who is my greatest teacher in the system of white supremacy? Fuller. When I ask myself that question, who is the greatest teacher that Neely Fuller has under the system of white supremacy? Answer, the white supremacists. So if I'm saying or doing anything, where did I get it? Including writing a textbook against the system of white supremacy. I got it from the white supremacists. If it hadn't been for white supremacy, I wouldn't be writing a book about white supremacy. Duh. So that, in answer to the question, anything that you see a black person doing anywhere on the planet, and they say there's something that shouldn't be done, you say, well, look at yourself. You taught them that. They didn't know nothing until you taught them. So white people, are way out of order, criticizing black people. We are your products, sir, ma'am. Look at what you have produced. Criticize yourself. You're looking for somebody to criticize.
Yeah.
So for you, I see this is something that everybody can say. You don't have to be trying to call in the radio stations and whatnot, going back and forth and writing articles and writing books on things that somebody who's running for some office, some black person, is doing and criticizing them. Say, wait a minute. Where are they getting this from? They ain't had but one teacher. That's the white supremacists of this planet. So you're going to criticize them, your victim? Criticize yourself. You made them into what they are. They don't know nothing else.
Okay. Fred in Honolulu. Do not be a stranger, a new caller, okay? All right. Well, Mr. Fuller, we have come to the end of today's show. Callers, we're there. You made it, and you made the show great. So thank you for calling in and for all your Gmails. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and we will try to do better next week. Thanks again, Mr. Fuller, and thank you to all, and we'll see you next week. Last word, Mr. Fuller.
We will try to do better. We will try to do better. That's the last word, because that's what we are supposed to be doing, including most of all, Neely Fuller. He better try to do better.
And Mr. Bobby. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert, and everybody. All righty.